This is a simple project where we'll be building a simple to-do app using Fast API for our backend and Angular for our front end. So it's very simple. In this app, you can view all existing to-do, you can add one, you can update, you can delete, and etc. So we'll also be making use of Postgres and MySQL. So for Postgres user, you can we'll be showing you how to integrate and connect with your Postgres DB. For my SQS users, we'll also be showing how to integrate and connect with my SQL. So let me just add a quick to do. Let's see how it's going to be. That's going to be, I can say, to, let me say, go and interview to get a job, something like that. Click on add. That's been added. I can click on edit to say interview. Let me say completed. And mark as completed, and that's been completed. I can mark this as completed, and those are completed. So that is it. I can delete, and that's out of it. I can delete, and that's out of it. So that's it, and we're going to dive right into it. Following this simple step out right here, I'm going to share this document so you can get to follow them to make things very easy. Also, the code for this project will be shared when it is completed at our end. So the first we have to do is to be sure that we have terminal installed. I'm going to open my git bash or command prompt or terminal. I'm just going to do python 3 space double dash version like that. If you have Python installed, it's going to display. If you do not have, you can just search for Python download, and it's going to take you to a page where you can download the latest version for your operating system. So that's the first thing we have to do. The next thing is to check if you have UV installed. So UV is more like pip, which is a package Python package manager. It helps you to package your application, to build, to manage, and do other things. Just like you have npm in JavaScript, so you also have UV or pip. So pip is something we've been using over the years, and UV it's a more recent and more better package manager. So UV it's what I basically use for all my Python projects. I've migrated my old project from pip to UV, so it's very easy, it's very self-managed, and it's it's a better version of pip. So if, for you to be sure if you have it already, just come to your terminal. You can search for UV space double dash version. And if you see something like this, that means you have it. If you don't see anything like this, that means you don't have it. The next thing is for us to go and download it. So again, this has already will be shared also. So you can click on that, and this is the UV installation, or you can go to your Google and search for UV installation or something like that. And again, just take it to this. So if you go to the documentation, you can select your operating system, copy this, paste it on your git bash or your terminal or your command prompt, and it's going to install for you. You can use this other installer like Pipey, like Homebrew, some other stuff like that. So that's it. After you've installed it, check the version again, and then let's move on. So the next we have to do is to initialize our project using the UV. Now we have UV installed. We have then move on to initialize our project. Again, I'm just going to be making use of my terminal. I'm going to seed into a folder where I want my projects to be in. I'm just going to create a directory right here. Call it, let me just call it to do something like to do, seed into the directory, and let me run the command uv init, then your project name. That's going to be uv init. Then I'm just going to call this to do backend. This is the backend part, which is, yeah, just enter, and project has been initialized. If I do ls, you can see this is the to do backend right here. Now we're going to head on to open this project in our code editor. So for this, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. It's a popular code editor. So I'm going to open it up right here. If you don't have Visual Studio Code, you should download it by searching for Visual Studio Code and click on this, and you're going to get it downloaded right away. So I already have it. I'm going to open it up right here. Click on Open Folder, or try to look for where the project is on your system. Mine was on tools right here, and that was called to dos, and that was to do backend. So open that project, and if I open the project, I can see this how it is. When you initialize your project, you're going to have this stuff right here. You're going to have your Python version. You're going to have your main.py, which you can run. You're going to have your project, pyproject.toml. This is more like gives an information on your project and also help to house your dependencies right here. Then more like a README stuff right here where you can write some stuff to give more information about your project. So that's it right here, and it's also going to create a Git for us, and you can see the Git ignore right here, and you can track this by using Git, defaultly created. So what we have to do next is to, install our dependencies. So again, we have the command right here. We want to have our Fast API. Again, this is a Fast API project, and we need to install our Fast API, which is going to be used as our backend framework. We install our Fast API using this command. We install the Unicorn server. The Unicorn server is an environment that where Fast API can run on top, and other dependencies can house or run on top. So it's just like a server that helps to run our Python project. We'll be using ORM, SQL Alchemy. ORM means Object Relational Mapper. It basically helps us to, write SQL script by using our Python code. So by writing a function or a class, is going to convert that to SQL and helps to connect to your database and do other stuff. So basically helps us, instead of us writing our database query ourselves, by writing Python code, it helps to manage our DB. So that's what ORM is, and the most popular one and the commonly used for larger scale project is SQL Alchemy. Then we will be, as we rightly said, we'll be using Postgres as our DB and also MySQL. So for Postgres users, you'll be adding this dependency, while for MySQL user, you'll be adding this dependency. So I'm just going to be showing how to connect both to our database. I'll be using both. Then we'll be using Alembic for our database migration. We'll be using pedantic setting to load our ENV variables into our project. Then we'll be using Greenlet for asynchronous DB query and all of that. So for us to have this dependency, you can either add them one after the other, or you can use this general command right here to install everything. So I'm just going to copy this command right here, and I'm going to come to my project, open my terminal like this, and make sure I'm in the root of where I have my project right here, pyproject.something. I'm just going to do the UV add, and you can see right here it auto created a .venv for me, and my dependencies were added right there, and those were in our .venv. So that's the power of UV. If we're using pip, he will not do that for us. So we have to manually create our environment and then start, doing stuff. But by using UV, which is an improved version of a Python code management, it helps you to auto manage your application within an environment. Now we can see this dependency have been added. For me to be sure, I'm going to go to my Py project like that. This file right here, you can see in the dependency part, these are the dependencies that were added for me. So we're going to proceed with the lecture. Let's proceed to, first of all, have a Python extension, which is going to help our IDE to recognize and properly format and write a Python code. So in your IDE right here at the left, you're going to see this kind of stuff right here, which is called extensions. Click on that, and you can see some extensions that are already there for me. That's for my IDE. Then moving down, you can see some extensions that are recommended and stuff like that. So what you just have to do is to come to the search right here and search for Python like that. It's going to search the marketplace and pull up some extensions with the name Python. I'm just going to wait for this to do, yeah, stuff like that. So you can see there are some different Python extension right here. So the ones that you should be interested in is this Python right here, the Python from Microsoft. So click on install and install it. Then you also have the Pylance, which is Pylance again from Microsoft. This helps to auto detect Python code and also help for auto importation. If you want to import code from one package to another, this is very helpful and can help you do that. So make sure you add this to your installation. Then lastly, have the black formatter right here. This helps us to auto add indentation to our Python by when we do Shift Command F, help us to format our Python code. So that's basically what this does. Help you format your Python code. This other one is the main one, help recognize that your code is Python, and the Pylance help for auto importation. So make sure you have those ones. You can move forward by having your Python debugger if you want that, or environment, some other stuff like that. You can add them for that. Okay. Also, some students also like to ask which theme I'm using. So for this course, I'm using a very dark theme called Pitch Black theme. I'm using this, it's not really the best theme out there. I'm using this because I'm recording my screen. So I want my code to kind of be a little bit clearer when you're looking at it. So that's why I'm using this. But if I'm working, I like using the Learn with Summit theme. So this is kind of like a very cool theme that you can try out and use. Yeah, so let me just show how this works. If I set this one right here, Dracula, my code is going to be something, I don't know, something like this. Or yeah, something like this. Yeah, let's just take it back to the black one. So, and then you can see so you can, have a better view of my IDE. So that's it. And these are the extensions we need. And what I have to do next is to let me look what I need to do next. I need to run application by using uv run main.py. So when you initialize your project, by default, you're going to see the main.py right here. And it's basically just stuff like this. So these are basically simple. This is to trigger your application to run. And this is basically a function that is going to run, which is being called right here when your app is run. So when you do main.py uv run, it's going to execute this right here. And what this does is it's going to run this main right here, this function. So whatever you have in this function will be run when you run this file. So let's do that. Come to your terminal again. Again, make sure you're in the root of your project and do uv run main.py. Hit enter, you can see, let me zoom this in. Hello from backend. This is being printed out, is coming from this right here. You can see it right here. See, so that means that application was run, and when it was run, this method was called and this was printed out. So that's it, and we're going to head on next to write our .env. We're just going to start something very serious. Let's proceed. We are going to have our DB connection. So right here in my root, I'm just going to right click on it and create a file, call it .env. Again, this file is going to contain our database URL. And we don't really want to expose our database URL because we'll be pushing our code to the public repo. So this will be ignored like that. So this is basically the coding standard. So let me call this database URL. And again, as we rightly said, we are going to be connect it to a Postgres and a MySQL DB. First of all, let's show how you can connect to a Postgres database. So I'm going to open my Postgres PG admin, which helps to connect to my Postgres. And as that is coming up, let me also pull my SQL up right there. Let me also pull my SQL Workbench out right there. If you don't have these, you can easily download them, and they're very straightforward to install. Okay, so yeah. So right here, for your database URL for Postgres, let me add a comment right here and say Postgres DB connection. That's going to be DB connection. That's going to be PostgreSQL, then plus ASY NC PG. If you are surprised where this is coming from, if you can go back to your library, to your dependency, so to say, you can say there is this ASYNCPG asynchronous Postgres. This is going to help us to connect to our Postgres, while for my SQL user, you have this one right here. So we'll be using that to connect to our Postgres DB. So that's going to be PostgreSQL plus your library, then like double column, double dash, then Postgres, which is going to be your Postgres username, then double column your Postgres password, which is your database password, at your DB URL. Mine is in the whole local host, and then your password, which is 54321 for my Postgres, then slash your database name. So I'm going to be creating a database name called Todos, something like that. So yep, so I'm just going to do that now. Let me not forget. So I'm going to open my pgadmin, come to my server right here. This is my PostgreSQL. Then within my database right here, I'm going to create a new one, which is create a database and call that Todos, something like this. And you can see the owner is Postgres, something. So click on that. Todos has been created. So that's going to be called Todos like that. So let also have connection for the MySQL guys. So this is going to be my SQL DB connection. The same way, let me say database URL equal to, that's going to be, since MySQL, then plus we need to make use of this MySQL library right here, plus this one, then double column slash slash your MySQL username, which is your database username. Mine is root. Then double column my DB password. Mine is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Kind of very simple. And at my DB link to my database, which is the local host, is currently right here in my laptop. And the port for my DB is 3306. Then slash my database name, which I'm going to be calling Todos. Then I'm going to open my workbench, click on my local right here. I'm going to create a database called Todos, like that. Fire that down, and that has been created. If I refresh, you can see Todos has been created like so, and that's going to be it. So I'm just going to comment this one out first. So let's just leave this one, and we're going to head on to have our config.py so we can inject our this value right here into our application. Currently, our the value resides in our .env, which is not yet in our application. So we need to inject this into our application so we can use it to connect to our actual database. So let's do that. I'm going to inject this into my application. And before I do that, let me first of all structure my folder right here. So I'm going to create an app within the roots of my application. And within this app, I'm going to create some folder. I'm going to have my core right there, which will contain my core implementation. I'm going to have my DB. Here we'll have my DB connection method. I'm going to have the models right there, which will contain my model. I'm going to have the schema, which will contain my schema, or we call DTO. I'm going to have my router, which will contain my APIs, and I'm going to have, let's say, our server service like that, which will contain our service method. So that's it. And next, I'm going to open to my core right here. And within my core, I'm going to create a new file, call it config.py, and this is going to contain my method, which will help me. Let me rename this correctly. Config. This is going to contain a method that will help me inject my ENV into my application. I'm going to create the class right away, and I'm going to call it settings like that, and that's going to extend a base settings like that, and this should be auto imported for me. But if I click that, I'm not able to import it. I'm going to really show you guys how to do that right away. Now here I'm going to have my base. I'm just going to call this database URL, which is going to be what we have in our .env, and that's going to be database URL right here, which is a reference of that, and that's going to be a string data type. And then I'm going to have my model underscore config. Again, I'm going to import all of these, and that's going to be settings config. And I'm going to say my env underscore file, where we are injecting it from, is going to be from our .env. Then comma, I'm going to say if there are any extra stuff in my env, ignore them. That's going to be ignore like that. Hope that spelling is correct. Then I'm going to export this and create an object of it by saying settings, small letter settings, so we can differentiate it from this one. That's going to be my settings like that. Just create an instance of it and then export it like so. Okay, now if you can see right here, if I try to click on it and click on dots, I'm not able to import all of these. Click on command dots, I cannot import them. I have to import it manually by coming right here and say import. If I won't say import, I'm not even getting a suggestion. So that means that my project is not able to recognize my Python environment, and I'm not able to make use of import right here. So for us to solve that, first thing we have to do is to come to our file right here, come to your file at the top, come to the code at the top right here, click on settings, click on setting, and right here search for auto completion like that. Then search for auto completion. Then at the tab, click on the user, then look for the extension tab right here. Look for your pylons, which is these pylons right here. Click on the pylons and make sure the enable auto import completion is enabled. That's the first thing, so that you can auto import your stuff when you are writing your code. And the second thing we have to do is to select an interpreter for this project. Currently, we do not have an interpreter selected. So for us to do that, click on command, comma, something like that. Okay, command P, yeah, select, click on, is it command P or shift command P? Shift command P. No, just do command P. Either of them is okay. So do command P like that, and at the top right here, search for Python select. So do stuff like this. Command P, and then search for Python. Say Python interpreter. So you're going to see where is it? You're going to see, move it this, but you're going to see Python right here. Select interpreter. So click on that. And then right here, you are going to see different interpreter right here from my Python. This one is coming from my, this, what was this called? This, my system. This other one is coming from this folder. We can see there is this one interpreter 3.14, which is coming from my environment right here, .env. Let me zoom this, which is this one right here, and from the to-do backend project, which is our project name. So by clicking on this, we're going to, that means that that interpreter has been selected for this project. And because of that, we'll be able to, import, things seamlessly. So if I click on command dot right here, you can see import from pedantic setting. So this stuff has come right there. And then if I don't want to do that, I want to type it manually. If I say import, and you can see, if I say import, you can see I'm able to get some Python stuff right there. So that's basically how it's done. So the first thing, again, let me recap. If you're unable to import, is to come to settings right here and click on setting, and then you can search for auto completion. You can see you can import auto completion. The another one is to say Python interpreter. That should be in our environment, not here. So that's going to come right here, and just click command shift command P, and then search for Python interpreter, then click on select interpreter like that, then select an interpreter for this project. So select the one that is within this one right here. You can see this is our project. Select that, and that's going to use interpreter in your VENV right here that was bundled for you to package application. So when that is done, you can seamlessly import and do your stuff. So I can just click right here, dot, this has been imported, click, select this one, that's been imported, settings. No, this should be the settings right here. Okay. So that's it. Setting is not defined. Let me format this. Our base URL, our model config, then settings equals to these settings right here. So I'm just going to, this setting should be like this. Yeah, just to be at the base right here. So we can, create an object of it, and then this can be reused. I'm going to head on to have my database connection method. So within my DB right here, this folder, I'm going to create a new file, call it database, BASE, that should be database. Database.py. And again, I'm just going to, first of all, create the engine by say engine. That's going to be, I'm going to use a method called create async engine. Remember, we want things to be asynchronous because our dependency is an asynchronous kind of dependency. So I'm going to just say, first of all, say settings. I'm going to pass in my database URL. That's going to be settings dot, settings is not there. So let me bring it down by importing it. So I was able, let me just come here and say, let me click on this and check if I can import it. I cannot import it. Okay. So let me import it manually. Say from our settings is in our app.core.config, import settings with a small letter S. And then let me also say from SQL alchemy.ext, something like this, dot unasync co import create section create async engine. Now I'm going to say settings dot database URL. By doing this, is going to help get hold of our database URL right here in our .env. Now I'm going to say command, then just say echo to be false. That's not going to print the operations out for us. So then after that, that can probably just put it in a straight line if you want to do that, or let me just leave it as it is. Then after that, I'm going to move this down. I'm going to create a section factory, which will help to create a database instance. So I'm just going to call that async ax. Let me see if I can remember this. Async section local, like that. That's going to be async section maker, which I'm going to import right here. Let me import it right here, which is right here. Then I'm going to invoke that and say bind to our ng right here, which we created above. And then comma, I can say expires on commit to be false. So what this means is that this is going to help us create our database section by connecting to our database and helping us create our database instance. And what we are doing by saying expire on commit equals to false, we are basically saying that this is going to prevent your database instance from expiring. Let's say you connect to our database and we'll perform an operation by saving a to-do item on the database or getting a to-do. After a database operation has been performed, do not terminate that instance. That's what expire on commit first. Do not expire that database instance. So I'm going to have a method so we can use to get the database objects by saying def means we are creating a method and say get db. Like that, that's going to help us get database instance. I'm going to say now sync with this one right here, async section local. I'm going to invoke it and then I'm going to call it as section, SESSION, and then I'm going to yield by yielding this section like so. This is going to help us get a database section. Like so, when I'm calling this, is basically invoking this, which will now help create an engine, use this engine to access our database URL, create a database instance. And right here, I'm basically calling that instance a section and I'm yielding it. So this is going to help us get our database. Now what I'm going to do next is to try to connect to this database so we can check if we can actually make a connection to our DB from this URL right here. So that will be done. So we're going to do that and try to connect to our DB. So what I want to do is whenever my application is run, whenever my project is run, I want to make connection to my DB and try to access my DB. If the connection is successful, I want to print connection successful. If it's not successful, I just want to print it out. That's going to make us know if we're able to connect to our DB. So within my app right here, I'm going to create my main method by saying main.py within my app right here. So remember, in our root project, we have main.py. This is basically for us to run our app, and then inside our app, I have my main, where we can have my methods to, where we have used my fast API to create an object of my application. I can configure my middleware right here and define my router and my API. You can actually do everything in your main right here. But most of the time, it's more appropriate to have a code right here to redirect the run to trigger this right here. So let's just do that. So now within the main of my root project, where we have the, underscore name right here, I'm just going to trigger to run the main in our app. So I'm just going to come right here and say, when your app is run, this main method is run, I'm going to say unicorn, before, let me even import it, unicorn. Let me see if I can import it I could not import it. Okay, let me just import it manually from here and say import unicorn. Okay, so I'm just going to say, if we remember our dependency, we have our unicorn right there, which is this one right here, basically our server. I'm going to say unicorn, import unicorn could not be resolved. Okay, that's not my problem. So unicorn.run, why is this unable to resolve? Let me see. I mean, that starts here. Okay, unicorn.run, I'm just going to check that out. I want to, when you do uv run main.py, I want to use Runicon to run our application, and that's going to trigger our app.main. It's going to trigger our main.py within our app folder, and I want to my host to be 0.0.0, which is going to be, that should be .4 another 0. You can probably use localhost. The reason why I'm using this host is that if you're on your server, your localhost, your host becomes the IP of that server. So wherever I decide to deploy my application, my host becomes the IP of that application, of that server. That's what this is. So if I'm running this on my local machine, my host will becomes 127.0.0.1 or localhost. So that's basically what this means. It's going to pick the IP of wherever you are running this project on. Then I'm going to define my port, which is going to be, let's say 80, 85, I don't know, anything. Then reload, because on a dev mode, reload is going to be true, which means that whenever there's a code change, that should be reload, spell it correctly. Whenever there is a change of code change, we should reload our application. We should just reload. So in a production, I'm going to turn this to false. So that's it. And within my main right here, within my app, in this app folder and my main right here, I'm going to have a method to create my objects and then run it. So I'm going to first of all come down right here and say app equal to fast API. And then I'm going to say title of the project can be to do app, anything you want to call it. Then description can be, let me just say, a nice to do app. Then I can pass the version, which can be anything, 0.1.1, 0.1.0, does not mean. Then I think that's all we have to do for now. Then I'm going to pass my middleware by saying app.add, there's it, add middleware right here, you can see. And that's going to be, I want to pass my course, CO, capital CORO, SM, this should be imported. I'm expecting this to be imported for me, my course middleware, comma, let me click dots, and that's not coming, so let me just import it from, I think my import is not working correctly, I'm not happy with it, okay? So yeah, so that's the fast API, from fast API, import fast API. Okay, then I'm going to say, okay, that's already been done right here. Okay, I'm going to say from fast API dot middleware dot course import course middleware. Yeah, that one. Then after that, I'm just going to pass in my origins by saying allow origins. It basically means that where do we want to allow to access these, our backend? We want to allow all endpoints, our origin from everywhere. Then I'm going to say allow credential and then some other allow methods and allow headers. Just do those ones like that. Allow credentials true, allow methods and allow header. Okay. And after that, I am just going to create a simple API by saying app.get, just create simple get method so we can get to see if this is working. Then when you go to the slash, I'm just going to pass a tags, which is going to be, let me just say, call this root. And then I'm going to create my function, which is called root, and that's going to be, I'm just going to return something by saying, yeah, hello, welcome to your to-do apps, blah, 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 stuff like that. Yeah. Now, that's fine. Now, for us to be able to check if we've connected to our DB, we need to use what we called a context manager or a lifespan. This is going to exist whenever our application is run. So I'm going to come right here at the top right here before I create my app. I'm going to come and say at asynchronous context manager. I'm just going to import this by importing it from context lib right here. And then I'm going to create my function. I'm going to call it lifespan. And I'm going to pass my app to it. I'm going to inject my fast API into it. And right here, I want to first of all print to say attempting to connect to DB, something like that. Just want to have some logs. Then I'm going to have my try and catch stuff right there. So what we're basically doing is that we're basically having a try, and I want to just, catch and then throw my exception right there. So that's going to be my exception. And let me import the content engine from our database. That's going to be from our app.db.database import engine, or not engine, not echo, like that. Yeah. Then this test should be imported from typing. Where is it? Should be imported from SQL Academy. Where's SQL Academy? Yeah, that one, like that. This is basically database stuff. So, and then very importantly, try to yield. If you don't yield this, you're not going to, you have a problem. So what we're basically doing right here is this is going to be lifespan. And for us to use this, I'm going to come to my fast API right here. Let me destructure this. And after my version, I'm going to say comma lifespan equal to our lifespan. So what this means is that before an object of my fast API is created, it's going to try to connect to our database. And when I'm shutting down my fast API, it's going to also shut down like that, something like that. Yeah. So let if we have to shut down, let me if we have to shut down right now. So if we are no shut down, this is going to print this stuff. When we are shutting down, we're going to just, close or dispose our database connection. That's what we're doing down right here. Okay. So in as much as our fast API is up, our database connection is going to be up. As we are closing down, is going to shut down our server, our database connection, and we're going to print these logs out like that. So this upper one is going to be startup. Let me have the comment up right here to say startup and then shut down. So that's basically it. So let me just try to test this out. uv run main.py, enter. Unicorn, okay, we're unable to get unicorn. I'm just going to check why. Right here, I'm unable to, unicorn is not detected. I'm just going to check why I'm unable to get my unicorn, which is already in my project. So I'm going to check that out, and then we're going to continue. Okay, I think I didn't spell it correctly. Yeah, I think it was spelled uni. I don't really know what the name was, but it's supposed to be UVCon, yeah, not unicorn, UVCon, yeah, okay. So let's do that again. And I just copied the dependency from here. I just copied the name right here, the name, and then I just pasted it here just to be sure that the spelling was correct. Now, let's run that again. Let me zoom this in. Run. Let's wait for the logs to see if it's able to connect to our DB. And unicorn running on this, okay. Where's my DB log? I'm not getting that. So let me see. Yeah, database connection failed. You can see, which is not a problem. So we are unable to connect. Database connection failed. Multiple exception. Let me check what's going on with my DB. It was unable to connect. Let me see. That's one Postgres 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. I think that's my password at localhost 43. Okay, I think my password is 5432. There is no 1 in my password. I just remember password is 5432. So let's stop this and try to connect, run again. You can see right now, attempting to connect to DB, successfully connected to database. So we've been able to connect to DB. And if I Control C, as I stopped it, we can see stopping in progress, database connection pool cleared. So when I stopped my DB, it cleared my connection pool. And if I try to pass a different database name and I try to restart, you can see database connection failed because this database does not exist. It is very clear error, very clear right here. All right, so that's it. And I'm just going to test for the MySql connection. So for our Postgres users, let's try to connect with you. I'm just going to, for our MySql users, so to say, and I'm just going to come to my MySql and make sure I have the to-dos database created. I'm going to come right here and Control C to stop this, clear this up, and then uv run main.py. Make sure you have your MySql stuff. Let's just test this out and attempt it to connect. Let me see. It's going to try. Let's wait for it to do its stuff. You can see successfully connected to my database, which is the MySql one, as we can see right here. So this means that both of our DB connection worked correctly, and we're just going to head on to, let me see, we're going to move on to have our model and then our ORM. So that's going to be like this. Within my model right here, I'm going to create my model. I'm just going to create a file, call it todos.py. I said todos.p, that's a little bit of weird stuff. todo.py, so let me break this down and zoom that a little bit up right here. So create my class, and that's going to be called base, and that's going to take a declarative. This is supposed to auto import for me, declarative base. I don't like when I type stuff. So let me try to import that again. It's not able to import now. So let me import it manually, which I hate doing stuff. I hate importing manually. I think that's the shortcoming of using a hybrid editor. So I'm just going to say from SQL alchemy.orm import declarative base like that. Okay. Yeah, this one. Okay. After I've done that, I'm going to say pass. This is very important. If you're using MySQL, if you're using SQL Alchemy, which is the most popular ORM, when you're writing your model, you have to create a declarative based object, which will then be injected and used subsequently. So this is the first thing you have to do. Just create your base, pass in your declarative base. This is going to be your declarative base. So just unfortunately, that's how things are done. Now, let me have my to-do model now. I'm going to call it to-do, and this is going to pass in my base, which again is going to be the declarative base, passing down. And here, I'm going to say underscore table name equal to-do. So this is going to be the name, the table name that will be created for us in our DB. So that's going to be the name. Then I'm going to then pass in my field, which is my ID, and that's going to be mapped. Okay, I need to import this mapped something here, mapped like that. So that's going to be a string, and that's going to be an data type integer, which is our ID, and that's going to be mapped underscore column, which I need to also import right here. Mapped underscore column. So what this does, it is help to create a column for us. I'm going to invoke it like that. So it helps to create a column in our database table for us with the name ID. And right here, I'm going to proceed to say primary key to be true, which means that this is going to be our primary key. And then I'm going to say auto increment to be true, which means that this will be self-managed. We have no business, messing around with this ID. So that's going to create a column in our database. It's going to create a table for us called to-dos, and within that table is going to create a column for us called ID. Let's create other column, which is going to be the title of our to-do. And again, we already know what that is. That should be a mapped. And then again, you can say mapped string data type. I'm just going to say optional of string data type string. Optional means that it can be null. It can either be a string or a none. Or you can say, if you don't want to use optional, you can say string or none. It's okay, same thing. This is just a modern way to write it, while the optional is for the older ones, for those who are using a Python with version lower than 12. So this is going to work. But for a more modern version, you use this one right here. Where is it? I'm just going back and forth. You use this one right here. Yeah. But who are going to work correctly? So again, this is going to be a column. So let's just invoke the mapped column so you can convert this to a column for us. So I'm just going to copy this and paste so I can have other fields up right here. And then this is the title, and let's also have a description for the next one. This again is going to be optional. And yeah, should I even I think the title should not be make optional. The title should be mandatory. So let me just remove optional from the title. You must pass in a title so we can make the description optional. So I think this is the best logic. So I'm going to have the is completed, which is going to help us to check if our to-do is completed. And this is going to be mapped by, and that's going to be a Boolean data type, true or false, and mapped column. And I'm going to say the default for this value should be, let's say false. I wanted to say true, let's say false. So if you are creating your to-do item, the is completed should be false by default. Now let me have the other field, which is going to be the date it was created. That's going to be created at, and that's going to be data type date time. That should be imported from date time, as we can see right here. And equal to mapped column, very important. And I'm going to have a default value by saying server default equal to a function, and dot now is going to get the current time and then set it as a created at. So let me also copy this and have the updated at, which is going to be the date time you updated it to do. So updated at again is going to be a date time, and mapped column, which means that we are creating a column on our database, and that's going to be server default equal to function.now, which is correct. It's going to create this. I'm just going to say this should be update. This should only update when there's an update. An update equal to function func.now. So what this does is that if you create an object of a to-do, the updated add value is going to be the current time. Whenever you're updating that to-do item, this onUpdate will be triggered, and then the current time as at that time will then be the new value of the updated at. So that's it for our to-do, and this is how ORM work. And by doing this, is going to auto generate the necessary SQL queries for us that will help us to auto create a database in our table called to-dos, help us create the columns, and also help us with the necessary code that can help us to add data, update data, and do other stuff. So we're going to head on to have our schema set up. Let me head on to have my schema. So schema, it's more like a DTO, or what we call a data transfer object. So it's basically going to be the class that will be used to receive the object to create a to-do, or we want to use to return a to-do response back to our API. So let's do that. That's going to be within the schema right here. I'm going to create a new file, call it to do, and all files should end in .py. So here I'm going to have my class. I'm just going to call it to do base. This is going to be used to create a to do and do all the stuff. So it's going to expect a base model. It's going to help us to register this as a schema, and it's going to have a title, which is a string, and then a description, which is also a string too. And because the description is going to be optional, I'm just going to say it should either be a string or it should be none, like that. And by default, let's make it to be none. Yep, so that's going to be our base. And let's also have to update our to-do. So that's going to be a class. If you want to update our to-do, we're going to be using this second class to collect the response or the request. We're going to use it to collect the request, and that's going to be to-do, no, to-do model, not base exception. What's that? To-do model, and I'm going to have my title, description, and is completed. All of these will be optional, which means that you can decide to update your title or the description or the is completed. And here I'm going to have something called model config, and that's going to be just any additional thing you want to do, which is going to be config dictionary, and that's been imported. Any extra thing you want to do, we can have them within this configuration right here. For example, we can say, I want to enable, camel cases. By default, if you are using this without any of this, you can, in your body, you have something like is completed. But we can say allow user to also say is completed. This is camel case. So I want to also be able to receive a camel case request from the front end. I'm just going to say alias generator, and that's going to be to underscore, where is it? To camel, like that, where is it? Equal to camel. I need to import this one again. That's import it from alias generator. So I'm going to say from pedantic dot alias generators, then import to camel. We also have to Pascal. You can see Pascal to snake, stuff like that. So yeah, so let me just get rid of this. This will help us to pass in a camel case. We have to convert this snake case to camel case. You can also have order by saying populate by name and other stuff, just have them up like that. Okay, so let's also have a class that will be used for response. That's going to be to do response. And again, this is expected. This is going to have everything in our to do base right here, which is the title and the description. Let me copy the to do base here. And in addition to the to do base, which means that in addition to the title and description, I also want the ID also to be a part of the response. And then also want is completed, and then is completed, created out, and then updated out. So I'm going to import the date time like that. So this is going to be our schema, and we'll be using these to receive the body to create a to-do. We'll use this to receive the request to update a to-do, and we'll use this to return a response whenever we've, done something. Whenever we've gotten the response from the DB and want to return the object, we use this to return. So also, a best practice is for us to have another file which will be used as a generic response. So we want to have a wrapper that will be used for all API response. That's going to contain the status code, the message, and then the data. The data in this case is going to be the to-do response here or any other thing. So within my schema, I'm going to call this response. Again, .py, and first of all, I'm going to have my type variable like this. Again, you're not to complete it. Okay, I think that's better. And that's going to be a T. And then I'm going to have my class. and that's going to be an API response. Call it an API response, and it's going to take in again a base model from pedantic, and then a generic from typing, and then that's going to be of T, type T, and that's it. So what fields do I need? And that's going to be, yeah, it's everything right here. Everything is right. So what field do I need? I need the status, and then the message, and then the description. So let's have it up right there. The status, the message, the data, and yep. So what's this? Our type var should be imported from typing, not AST. So remove that one. Put the comma right here. It should be imported from typing, our type var. Okay, so I can add some model config right here again as usual, and say config dig like that, not like dig, but I mean dictionary. So I'm just going to say from attribute true and exclude none to be none. So exclude none means that if there are any of these value whose data is not there, then do not add it along with the response. So that's it for that. And what should I do next? We need to head on to have our service class. Let me see. Okay, now before we have our service class, let's persist this data. Let's persist this so that if we go to our DB right now, if I say select, no need for every select all from to do's like that, you can see there's no, I don't have my table is empty right now. So let's persist this data. Let's perform a migration so that this model right here can be created. This table can be created in our database so we can get to move on. Let's perform our migration. And again, the first thing for me to do is to just run this command, uv run alembic init, then you -t, then you can pass in what async, then call it migration. So when you run this, it's going to generate some folders and some file for us, and we're going to see. Let me close all of this for now, close all, and yeah, let me also close my app too, so we can get to see the changes. So within your terminal, paste it right there, or you can write it out. Let me zoom it. Uv run alembic init -t asynchronous migration, enter, and it's going to create a migration folder for me right here. And then you can see the alembic.ini file. We don't really have to mess with this, leave it as it is. And in this migration right here, let me put it down. Within the migration folder, open the migration right here. You're going to see env.py. Click on this right here, and then we're going to, just do some little modification right here. So we down after this config right here, I'm just going to say config dot set main option, and then I'm just going to say SQL alchemy. That's going to be, you can remember we're using SQL alchemy as our ORM. So SQL alchemy, which are ORM dot URL, and I'm going to say settings. Let's get our URL, settings dot database URL. This setting should be small letter s. That should be small letter s right here. The object of the settings coming from our config within our app. If we can remember, call this one right here, so we can get hold of this our DB URL. So that's what we need to do. Then that's the first thing we need to do. I can just add a comment right here to say I added this. I done something just to be sure, so we can. So when you look at my code, you can get to see the one I added and the one. Let me say we added this. Then after you've done that, the second thing you have to do is to register your model. You can see down right here. We are being told that add your model metadata object here. For auto-generated support from this, this is just like the default one that was created for us. We need to modify this and add our own. So I'm just going to say, I modified this. We modified this just to say the ones we did do. and then 1, just to show the changes that we made. So for this one, I'm just going to uncomment these two out, down, and then this is going to be from my model right here. Let's import it from app.models. This is our model. Import, our model was called to-dos. Then right here, I'm going to say metadata is going to be the to-dos dot base dot metadata. You can get rid of this one down. No, okay, so that's just what we need to do. Just this one and this one, that's all. Okay, so that's it. And after you've done this, let's perform a migration. After we've done this, I have the directions right here. The next is for us to execute this command to create our migration, and then we can persist it to our DB. So I'm just going to copy this right here. There's no need for us to type it. You can go on the AI platform, just type, migrations in Fastapi using SQL or RM. It's going to show you the command. So we don't need to have that in mind. Just copy that, and again, I'm going to pull this up right here. Clear this, paste it right there. Run UV run Alembic revision auto generate initial migration. You can say initiate, anything you want to call it. Enter. And you can see it has created some kind of crazy schema table for us, which has not been persisted. If I come right here and I execute this or I refresh, it has not been persisted. You just have the Olympic version, which has been generated for me. So I need to persist this to my DB. I'm going to come right here and run this command. Very simple. And paste it right there. UV run Olympic upgrade head, enter. And that's going to, okay, virtual require length of, okay, I'm having a problem with my migrations. Okay. Yep. So that means my primary key is not okay. I need to make modification to my model right here. So come to my to-dos right here. Let me look at the problem I'm having here. And primary key is mapped by an integer. Okay. Primary key should be true. Auto increment should be true. Okay. All right. Let me see. Which other problem? Let me look at the error. I think the error is a little bit crazy. Let me just copy the error and ask my Gemini AI to help me, make do justice to it. Copy it right there. Copy my model as well. And let me just see what's going to tell me. The core problem is asking me table title virtual require length of, okay. So it's telling us to, let me see. Okay, it's telling us to specify a character right here to the title. Okay, you can see this is it. We are told to specify for a mapped column. We are told to specify a character, something like that. So I'm just going to, let me see. I'm just going to do that. So copy this one right here. Let me just type. I don't need to copy it. Let me just type string and then your character right there. Okay. So come back right here and say for the column, the title, I'm going to say string, which is from Ask SQL Academy, and then my total value for the title should be 255. That should be the length. For my description, I'm going to say string. The total value should be like 1000. For the total character in my description, I want it to be 1000. So that's it. We need to do this again. And I'm going to perform the migration again. Let me clear this. And then let's do that again. We need to perform a new migration. So copy this, generate migration schema. Let's have a new migration and then call it initial migration. Let me just say updated. It's gonna create a new migration for me, which is error failed, target database is not up to date. Okay. We assume non-transactional. Okay, let me just, don't really want to waste time there. Let me just, don't want to debug that on my own. Let me need a helper, a helpmate to help me debug this. Okay, delete or broken migration stuff. Let me see. Okay, run this. Okay, let me see. Drop. Okay, we need to SQL. Okay, we need to drop the existing migration. Okay, let me do that. Come right here. This is the existing migration file right here. Let me delete it. Drop it. Drop table. Is it? Yeah. So let me delete the existing migration file. Let me perform the migration again. That's what AI told me. So let me perform the migration again. Fail target database is not up to date. See the same thing. All right. So let me see. Let me see. Okay, let me do that again. Target DB. So let me refresh this DB. I think that was removed. So what's the problem? Refresh this right here. Okay, refresh this right here. Table. The table was, I think the table was not removed. Let me drop table again. Drop now. Right. So let me refresh. Yeah, I think that has been dropped. Okay, so let me do that again. Perform migration again. Enter. And okay, let me just move on. I'm still getting the error. Let me just do this to persist the stuff like that. Let me see. Okay, again, I think this was not properly done. Let me refresh this. Let me drop. Okay, table. And then drop that table. Now refresh. Table is gone. Okay. Yep. So let me clear this up and do that again. And let me say new. So we're still having the error. Let me see. Let me run this one right command right here. Okay. Kind of a little bit creepy. Let me run this one. And let me get rid of the head right there. Let me remove the migration. Let me remove this migration right here. Okay, let me just tell AI this is what I found, then you can help me remove it. Okay. Yep. Say, can you remove the migration so I recreate it? Something like that. Delete the migration file. Okay, I don't really like doing this, but let's just delete the migration file and let me see. Yeah, that migration file has been deleted, so not the entire folder, that particular file. So let's create it again. And let me see my database table. Yeah, let me remove what I have right here because this is always generating a migration for me. Let me drop this one. Does not really mean, but yeah. So I've removed the old one. Let me generate, initiate the migration again. This one. Okay, that's generated, and let me run the head like that. You can see migration was successful if I come to my DB and I select off from to-dos. What's going on? Let me refresh this one. Tables right here, and you can see I have my to-dos. It was actually called to-dos. Yeah, select off from, I didn't specify the database name, which is to-dos dot to do. So that's kind of, I don't know. That's okay. That's a little bit weird. Yeah. So right now our migration is successful and we can see that the database was persisted. So the problem we had was very simple. When I created my database columns right here, title description, I didn't specify the value that the column should, especially for a string data type, you need to specify the maximum value that can be stored right here. If you're using a MySQL, but for a Postgres, it does not really mean it default to, I think, to this value for Postgres. So this should be done for MySQL people, so you can do that. So let's do the same migration for a Postgres. So I'm going to change my ENV to Postgres, so we can target the Postgres DB. If I come to my Postgres right now and I to-dos and I refresh and I come to my schema and I come to my tables right here, you can see there's nothing right there. So let us execute this query and say, let me say new, something like that. And that's been, okay, the database up to date. Okay, let me just upgrade this head so you can, you can make use of that. So execute that, and that's been done. So let me check my Postgres now. If I refresh, you can see my to-dos right now has been created. As you can see, if I open my Postgres query 2, not that one. If I open this query 2, which is here, query 2, I say select all from to-dos. You can see now my table is there. So this has worked correctly. We're going to head on to have our service method and then our API. Then we test this out and then we head on with our front end. So let's head on to have our service. So again, within my app right here, I'm going to my services right here. And I'm going to create my service class. I'm just going to call this todos.py. And that's going to contain some of my, I'm going to have a method. I think we've been using to do all the time. Let me just call it to do underscore service to a little bit. I mean, we've had too many to do's, so to do underscore service like that. That's a little bit better. And we're going to be having method to get all the to do, to get a to do by ID, to create and then to update a to do and then to delete. So it's kind of very fun. So create a method to get all your to do's and call it get all to do's like this. What you need to do, you pass your database, which is what we remember. We want to have access to our DB to be able to connect to our database and get our to do. So I'm going to import this right here, and that should be imported from our SQL Alchemy .ext.asynchronous stuff like that. And this method is expected to return, which is dash arrow. It's expected to return a list. A list should be from your typing when you want to import it. It's expected to return a list of to-dos. Not no, let's not use capital letter L. Let's use small letter list. I'm just a little bit list, yeah. List of to-do, which is going to be to-do, which is from our schema. Or okay, let's say from our to-do, our database. So we're accessing DB right here. So here I'm going to say results, which is going to be result from our database query. That's going to be, we are awaiting our database dot execute, and I'm going to have my select, then want to select to do, which is our model, to do dot where, then the where's my to do, where to do dot id is equal to Am I even sure I'm doing the right thing? No, I'm not doing the right thing. I think I'm a little bit lost right here. So I'm actually writing a query to get a to-do by ID. So to get all to do, that's going to be await db.execute, select to do. That's going to be order by, select to do dot order, order by, order by should auto complete. What's going on? Dot order by, that's going to be to do dot created at dot descending. Want to get the latest to do first. Let me invoke the descending like that. And then I'm going to return the list of everything. That's going to be the result. Then dot scalar, scalars. Is this? Yeah, scalars. And then I'm going to invoke that and say dot all, and then invoke that method. So let me just explain this. So what basically doing is we are waiting because it's actually an asynchronous operation right here. We are waiting, we are having connected to our database. We are accessing the existing database session we have, which was created when our app was run. And we are basically saying that the database.execute, we're executing this command. Everything right here, it's a command. And what's the command? We are accessing our database table by saying select to do, which is our database name. And we are getting all the value from our DB. And we are ordering them by, it created that we're getting the latest value first. So which means that if we have 1,000,000 data, we are getting the last one, the latest data that was added first, and that will be returned right here. And we're just getting all the value and returning it right there. So this is expected to return a list of the to-do right here. So that's it. So let's also have to async def, which is a function to get a to-do by ID. And then that's going to take in this right here. Let me just copy this database here. And since we want to get a to-do by ID, we need to also pass the to-do ID, which is going to be an integer. To-do underscore ID, which is an integer like that. And then this is going to return a to-do, just one object. So again, I'm going to have my result set, which is going to be results, which we are awaiting our db dot what's going on right here, execute, and then I'm going to say select. What do I want to select? Access our to-do database, and then I'm going to say dot where, which means that we don't want to get everything, we want to get particular data, dot where, and what we want to do, we'll say where the to-do ID, which we want to get, is, let me even do this right here, is equal to the to-do ID that we are passing in. So I only want to get the to-do whose ID is equal to the ID that is coming in. So that's going to get that item. I'm going to say to-do now equal to the results which we've gotten from our dp dot scalar one or none. Invoke that. And if there is none, if not to do, if we do not have that item, I'm just going to raise a HTTP exception. Else, I'm just going to return the data. So HTTP exception should be imported from Fastapi, which is this one right here. And status should be imported from Fastapi 2, which is going to be, where's the Fastapi, comma, status, like that. Import, why am I importing select? Select should be coming from the SQL Academy. Just going to say from, this is wrong. It's going to be from SQL Academy import select. So also be careful on where you are importing your stuff from, okay? So we will not, get into problem. So what's this one? Schema, no, we don't need this one. So that's it. And let me just call this to do data like that, data. like that. Okay, so this is going to help get a to-do by ID, which is an individual to-do. And let's also have a method to create a to-do. So that's going to be moving down right here. And async function and call that create underscore to-do. And again, that's going to take in our DB data like this one. DB data, which is this one. And then comma, we need to also pass in the to-do object, which is going to be, it's a to-do to create. Let's just call it that way. And that's going to be our to-do base, which is from our schema. So let's not forget that. And then I'm going to, what is going to return? This is going to return the created to-do, which is the to-do. So moving down, let me move this a little bit back. Now what do I want to do? I'm going to say new to-do equal to to-do. Then I'm just going to use this and say model dump. So what this model dump means is that in this our object which we are passing in the to-do is going to collect the ones that have data and is going to convert them to this right here. So if there's any data that, oh, I'm not supposed to click on this one. So if there's any value here that is not present, or if there are extra feed that do not correspond to our to-do object right here, it's going to ignore them, pick the one that is there, and then convert it and populate it as this to-do right here. So that's what this model dump does. Just a straight way to just say, if you have a title, add it. If there's no description, remove it. Just a straightforward method. So after I've done this, I'm going to then persist this to my DB by saying db.add. And then I'm going to say, what do I want to do? Add a new to-do, which is this object right here, to our DB. Move this down, which is this one right here. Now you've done that, what do I want to do? I'm going to await the result by saying db.commit. So commit is that I'm going to persist the data into my database. And I'm going to await another thing by saying db.refresh. And then that's going to be the new to-do. So that means that this new to-do right now is going to be the to-do that has been saved in our DB. So all the value you have right here, the existing value of this new to-do object will now be the value that was committed in our DB, including the ID which was saved. Remember, this did not contain the ID. The new to-do had no ID. But right now, as we are refreshing it, we are passing in the saved ID down to it. So then I'm just going to return the new to-do like so. And that's pretty cool. So that's it to create to-do. Let's also have to update a to-do. This is going to be very straightforward, just as we did. And it's going to take in your DB and then your update to-do data. So let me just copy this one right here. And then say to-do to update, something like that. And this is going to return a to-do for me. So right here, as we did before, I'm going to first of all say to let me just say existing to do. That's going to be, I'm going to await my database, which I'm going to be using to update to do. I'm going to say await. As a matter of fact, if I'm passing in my DB, I need to pass in the to do ID because I want to update a to do. So I'm just going to say to do underscore ID, which is an integer, like so. So await this method get to do by ID, which we created above, get to do by ID, passing your DB and then passing the to do ID. This is going to help get our existing to do if it's there. And then I'm going to say update data, which is to do to update, like that. That's going to be to do to update dot model dump. We already understand what model dump is. And then we're going to pass a query to say exclude onset to be true, which means that if there's any value that were not set in the to-do base, is it to-do base? I think this should be to-do to update, not the base. So this should be to-do to update here. Yeah. So if there's any value in the to-do to update data that we are not passing in, let's ignore that. That's what this does. We're going to remove those values and set it as the updated data. And then I'm going to, just update it right away by coming right here and say, that's going to be existing to do. That's on for key in updated data.items, which is all of these. We are setting the attributes right there, committing it and then refreshing it and then returning it. So this is just going to help us update our to-do. Lastly, let me quickly have to delete our to-do. It's very straightforward. I'm just going to have it up so we will not waste time. So that's it to delete a to-do. What are we doing? We are passing the to-do ID and we're basically getting the to-do by ID. After you've gotten it, I'm just going to say db database.delete that to-do we've gotten. Is going to remove it from our database. We're going to commit and return nothing. So that's it for our service. And what we have to do next is to have our API or our router, which we then pass where we call this service from. Now for us to have our route, I'm going to close all of these so we can have some breathing space. And right here within my panel, I'm going to go to my router right here. I'm going to create a new file. I'm just going to call this todo underscore API.py. This is going to have contain our API. And it's going to be very straightforward. The first we have to do is to create our router object by saying router, which is going to be API router. Import it from Fastapi API router right here. And then I'm going to say my prefix equal to, it can be anything, let's say /todo. So what it means is that before I do that, let me add a tag, which I'm just going to call todos. So what this prefix means is that if you go to your URL /todos, it's going to call whatever you are going to be having right here. Now, before we proceed, we need to tell our main app where our router is, where our API is. So I'm going to come to my main right here, the main within the app, and I need to register this route. Remember, this is now our API. We need to register these in our app so we can get to know where we can forward requests to that stuff. So I'm going to come right here and register the router and say below the middleware right here, I'm going to say at app, not at, let me just say app dot include router, and that's going to be todo underscore router. Before I will do that, let me even import this router right here. So that's going to be, let me import it right here. So that's going to be, say, todo router. That's going to be from app dot routers import todo API. So that's going to be right here. Todo API dot router. So this is going to help us to register. Very, very important. So you have to, let me add a command, say register your todo router here. Yeah. So if you don't do this, there's no way the application will be able to access this router right here. Okay. But registering that router, if any route goes to /todos, is going to get to know that and then trigger this, like that. So let's continue with our method. So first of all, let's have a method to get all the to do. So that's going to be at router. Why am I using at router like that? Make sure your notation is at router dot. What do you want to do? A get request. So if this is a get request and the path is the root, that means if you on localhost 8085 slash to do's and this is the root right here, then you want to do something. First of all, the status code for a successful response is going to be status. This status should be coming from Fastapi right here. Status should be status dot http 200 dot OK. So a successful response will be a 200 OK. Then let's have a method like that, which is going to be a get request. They say let's call the function name get to do's. And then this is expected to take in our DB, which is going to be an async, our async section like that. And that was being imported from, let me import it, say from SQL academy.ext dot async cio, something like that. Import your async, this one right here, async section, this one. Okay, so this is going to be passed in, and I'm going to say equal to the value of this database is going to be, say, depends, which is going to be fast API. Is going to be the get underscore DB from our database. Okay, so that is it. And one little problem, this depends right here should be, yeah, it should be there. So that's fine. Okay, so then this is expected to return something. So I'm going to say it's expected to return an API response of a list. This should be small letter. I'm always fond of having capital letter. If a list of to do response like that, first list of to do response like that. And I'm going to say to do's equal to await our to do service dot get or to do's, and I'm going to pass my database down like so, and then I'm going to return the data by building my API response and saying the status is going to be status dot http 200 dot OK. What's going on? http 200 dot OK. And then I'm going to say the message will be to do's cutting, will be anything you want to pass in. And then the data right now is going to be the to-dos we've gotten from our service, which is going to be the to-dos like that. So that's it. Again, let me destructure this so I can explain this properly. Now, what we have right here is that this is a route, which is a get request. We are basically subscribing to this base router right here and saying when a get request is coming in and is within the root of your application, if it's a successful one, the HTTP status should be success. Now, this, when the request is coming in, this is what should be method that should be fired. The first thing you have to do is to get the database instance and then set it as DB, which is an asynchronous section. Get the database section, the existing database section, which is the connection to the database. Get hold of that database, save it as the DB, and you are expected to return an API response of a list of to-do response. Now that you've gotten the database instance, call the to-do service and then pass the database down to the get all to-do method. This is going to use the database instance to access our DB to get all the to-do and then return it right here. Now that we've gotten the to-dos from our service method, we want to build the response. We're basically building the API response. We are passing the status right there, the message, and then the data, which is going to be our to-do. Remember, our API response was what we built in our response. And we basically said that all our API should return this method right here, should return an API response, all our API. So whatever, either you are doing a delete request, a get request, a post, this should be the format of the response we will be returning so we can structure our app properly. And that's what we are doing right here. So that's it for getting to-dos, and we're going to be very fast to have a method to save a to-do. I'm going to call that post a to-do. So we've kind of, done a lot of talking right here. So let me just be very fast with this one. And this has been pre-done quickly. And that was to create a to-do. So again, we're basically saying router.post. If this is a post request, then passing the to-do base. The to-do base is basically the body that we pass down from our API, either from your front end right here. It can be the body coming from your front end to add a to-do, title, description. This will be bundled into a base to-do, which is this one right here. Where is it? Base to-do and passed in. Then again, we are getting the database instance and saving it as DB. Both of these data would be passed to the create to-do method of the API service, which will then use that to create a to-do. And after that, it's going to return the new to-do created as new to-do. Then we're going to bundle this new to-do into our API response, passing the status code, the message, and then the created to-do, and then we return it right here, which can then be returned back as a response of a successful to-do creation. That is it. Let's also have to get a to-do by ID, which again is very fun. This will get a to-do by ID. Again, it's a get request. When you go to your get request and you pass in the ID to the URL, which we usually call the parameter, and it's going to call the get to do method. And again, we are passing it to do ID, and then we are getting the database instance. Both of these will be passed down, and we'll call the method to get it to do by ID. If the data has been gotten, we're going to return this API response down. Let's also have to update a to-do, and then we have to also delete a to-do. So same way, very simple. The only change is the object that we're passing at the body and then the method. So this is going to be to update a to-do. Again, the method, it's a put request. And if you go to users go to /update, then the ID is going to be passed down, and then we are collecting the ID right here, which is being passed down. And we are also collecting the body of the to-do to be updated, which is the to-do update. And the database session is being created and passed down. And these three data will be passed down to the update to-do method. They will be worked on, and the resulting data will be bundled into the API response and then returned successfully. Now, let's also have to delete a to-do, which is the last one. And that's it right here. Again, it's a delete request, and this is the path. Path can be anything. And then we are passing the to-do ID one to delete, and then the database section, which we are getting and pass it down, is going to make use of the to-do ID, and we delete the to-do with this ID by calling the delete to-do from the service method. So that's it for our API. And we're going to head on to test this out. To test this out, I'm going to first of all run my application. Again, before you do that, always make sure that your router or your app has been registered in your main. So if you've not done that, come to the main.py within the app folder, add this stuff right here, app.include router, and then your API, then the router. So I'm just going to run my app by using uv run main.py. Okay, we are having problem with, we are not able to run this. Let me complete model class and stuff. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm importing some wrong stuff right now. I might not be able to check everything. So let me just tell, okay, pedantic v2. I think I'm having some crazy stuff. Let me see what the problem is. And then we know what to do. So let me come to my service right here. Go over the error and see what is going on. Okay. All right. So import datetime. Okay, you're probably okay. I'm not importing the datetime correctly. Okay, probably, yeah, that's correct. I'm not importing the datetime properly. So let me look for where that problem is, and let me see. Come to my API. No datetime is there. Come to my service class. No datetime is there. Come to my module, which is my schema. Yeah, this is it. So schema, this is it. So yeah, use import from datetime, import datetime. So this is how it should be. So again, Control C, clear this kind of creepy stuff. And let me clear this up again. Close all. uv run main.py. Everything has run correctly. So let's test this out. I'm going to be using Postman. Postman is a testing client for us to test. So I'm going to use Postman. I'm going to come right here and create a, let me say create, I don't know. I want to create a new collection, I'm going to call that to do, like that, or to do's. Then right within that collection, I'm going to add, this is the folder, right? I'm going to add a new request, and I'm just going to call it get all to do's, like so. Again, our port is running on, our app is running on port, what's the port? Let me see, 8085. So that's going to be localhost 8085 8080 slash to do slash just to do's, and that's a get request, and send. Yeah, all our to do have been fetched, but we have no data, which is empty. The API have worked. So duplicate this, and let me add a to do right here. That's going to be a post request, and that's going to be called add to do, and that's going to be a post request. And I'm going to click on the body right here, click on the raw, and here should be the JSON selected. And let me allow this to load. Then create an object, which is like a JSON dictionary object, and that's going to be the title. I can just say that's comma, and I can add a description. Yeah, Let me just say title should be to write some code or to write some code. Description is probably, I don't know, so I can learn to code, something like that. Yep, so click on send. You can see to do created. Let's create more. So visit grandma added to, let me see, this time around I want to pass a description. Let me say to eat burger, and then to watch football. Yep, so if I try to get all to do's again, we can see we have some pretty data up right here, which is a little bit. We have our title, description, the is completed, the created, the updated app. So let's also have to update to do, which is going to be update to do. That's going to be a put request, and the path should be slash to do's slash the to do one update. Let's update the first one, and then click on the body raw, the JSON right here, and then I just want to update the description only, and that should be an description, and then say I was updated, something like that. Send, method not allowed. Okay, let me see what is the problem. Come to my API right here, router, and to update a to do, that should be, let me see, that should be slash update. So I didn't pass that correctly. That should be slash to do slash update slash the ID. Send, to do updated successfully. I was updated. We can see the value right here. So let's finally delete a to do, delete to do, and that's going to be a delete request. And that's going to be slash delete slash, that's going to be to do ID2, or let me delete the first ID1, to do ID1, send, to do deleted. If I try to delete it again, you can see to do not found right here. So let me get it to do by ID. This is going to be the last, and let's get to do by ID, and that's going to be slash to do slash one. That's going to be get request. Send, to do not found because it was recently deleted. So let me get to do two. Send, and to do has been retrieved. So if I try to get out to do's again, that's bam, I have all the item. If I go to my DB and I try to get all my to do, you can see they are both right there, seated right here. So that's it for our to-dos. Our app has worked correctly, and we're going to head on to have the front-end implementation. So we'll move on to have our front-end in Angular. So I'm going to come to my browser and go to Angular official documentation. That's going to be angular.dev. And here, this is the documentation for Angular, and I'm going to just click at the left panel right here on docs. And scrolling down, you can see at the top right here, you can see installation. Let me click on it. And you can see right here, to install that, you need the Angular CLI. So if you want to check whether you have Angular installed, you can open your git bash or command prompts or terminal and just do ng space dash dash version. If peradventure you have Angular installed, you're going to see the Angular and the version. If your version is below 20, then you have to click on this link so you can upgrade your version. Or if you don't have Angular CLI installed, copy this link and it's going to help install that on your system. Now, after you've done that, the next thing is for us to create a project right here. So I'm going to create a project. And before I do that, I want to cd into this folder where I will be creating a project on, and this is basically the folder where my backend is. So I'm going to be creating a project right here. Again, to create the project, you copy this command right here. For me, I'm going to type it out. That's going to be ng, which basically means Angular new, which means we are creating a new project. And then I would enter the project name, which is going to be, I'm just going to call it Angular dash front end, something like this. Enter. And it's going to ask me to select my styling, which is going to be CSS. Do I need to enable a server-side rendering? That's going to be no. Enter. And just click on none. Do I need any of these agents? Am I working with cloud or cursor? That's none. And that's going to take some time to bootstrap and create my project for me. So when it is done, we're going to come back and then look at the file structure and then kick on our implementation. The project has been created and I'm going to open this up in my Visual Studio Code. I'm going to come to my Visual Studio Code right here and click on the new window. And then I'm going to come to open the folder project, and that was in to do, and that was called Angular front end. So this has been opened up and I'm going to run this by coming right here, opening the terminal, and then I'm going to just zoom this in a little bit. And to run it, you do ng-serve, or you can do npm run. Let's go to the package.json and see the script for running. You can see you can do ng-serve or npm run start. Either of them is okay. ng-serve is going to run, or you can do npm run start. This is going to run your application. So let's just wait for this to run and let's see the outcome. So you can see this is it right here. And if I go to the link and have it right here, you can see this is our application, and this code is coming from your project right here, which is basically your app.html. If I go to my SROC and click on the app folder and go to the app.html, this is where our codes are coming from. So if I get rid of everything, let me just get rid of everything. Let me get rid of this style right here. And for the main, let me get rid of everything. And then let me just have a div to say hello world and have a h1 and say hello world. And if I come right here, you can see hello world right here. So that shows that everything was coming from the app.html right here. So that is it. Now, before we head on, I want us to get an overview of what these files mean, the file structure. So starting from the file bottom right here, we have the ts config. This is basically our configuration for TypeScript, because we are using TypeScript. Same with also this other one. This one is specific for the TypeScript testing, but this one is specific for TypeScript for our project, not the testing part. This other one is the TypeScript general configuration for our application, how it should be compiled, how the TypeScript should be recognized. The readme.md give an information on some dummy documentation like how to run your app, how to build, and etc. Then the package.json right here, as you rightly saw, it contains information about our project, our name, some of the scripts that should be executed and what they do. And it also has our dependency right here. You can see these are the dependency we are using: Angular, React, LSJS, and then also some of our dev dependency like TypeScript, Prettier, and JSDOM, and some other Angular CLI like that. Package.log, this keep a history version of the dependency we've used or we've installed in our project. Angular.json right here, this contains a configuration for our entire app, such as how should our app be built, what styling, what will be the global styling and all of that. Just a basic configuration. Now, if you come right here, you can see it's saying that our styles, which is our global style, should come from the sroc/styles, which is going to be the source folder. Then you have the styles right there, which is this style right here. So whatever you have right here is being injected into your application. So if you have a style in a different folder, you can come right here and configure that to point to that. So this again is basically that shows the angular.json, gives an overview of where you can, how your project can be configured. Moving down, you can see the maximum package size of your project. All of those are right there. We can modify them if you want to. The .prettier, this is a configuration for the formatter we are using, which is prettier. So if you are using a prettier formatter for your code, this is gonna be created for you. But if you are not, you're not going to see this. Then the .editor configuration for our editor, you can specify your indent size, your indent style, and some other encoding character set like that. So our public is basically going to contain some static file. Then we have the SROC right here where we'll be working on the source folder. Then you can see we have our style.css, which is we can have a global style as it rightly points. We have the main.ts. This is what package our application, everything we have, we package everything. You can see this is importing the app, we package everything right there and dump it in our index.html. Remember, the browser can only recognize a HTML file. So this index is what is being run, and everything, our app is packaged by the main and dumped inside the index right here. In the app folder right here, you can see some other stuff, the app config, the app styling, the app HTML, and the app routes, where we can register our routes. Then we have our spec, which is used for testing. And then we have our app.ts, which is the component that controls our app.html. So the way TypeScript, the way Angular is structured, for your component, a component has the component TypeScript, which is this, the template, which is the HTML type, and then the styling, which is the CSS. So that's basically the structure for an Angular component. And we're going to be working with all of these as we go. Now we're going to head on to have our navbar and our footer setup. So let's have our navbar. Now before I do that, the first thing I normally do when I create an Angular project is to configure the app so I can make HTTP call. Now for us to do that, you come to your SROC right here within your app folder. You go to the app.config.ts, and right here, I need to register my app so I can make API call. So remember, we are going to be making API call to our backend to do data, update, and delete. And for us to do that, you need to tell Angular that, hey, I want to make API call, enable me to do that. And to do that, just come right here and say, add your provider where is it? Provide HTTP client right here, and just invoke it, and that's been added. And you can see that's been imported also for me. If peradventure you are not able to import that, you can import it manually. So let me just add a comment and say it's required for API calls. So if you know you're going to be making API call in any of your Angular project, make sure you add this. This will make it work. If you don't put this, you won't be able to add. But I believe in future Angular release, they should have modified this and added by default. Okay, so now that's that, and I'm going to create my Angular, my Navbar component by coming to my terminal right here, and I'm going to be using the command ng G, which means generate, C, which means component, and that's going to be called navbar. You can call it anything. So this is the CLI command for creating a component, nggc, then navbar. Or you can write it in full, means say Angular generate component, then the component name. Click enter, and you can see a folder was created for me that has 4 of these. we have the CSS, the spec, the component, and then the template. So now if I come right here within my SROC project inside my app, you can see right here a folder Navbar was created, and if I open that, it has the CSS, which is going to contain our styling for that Navbar component. We have the HTML, which is going to be where we have our HTML code. We have the spec, which is going to where we'll be writing our test. If you want to write a unit test for this component, that will be written right here. Then we have the navbar.ts, which is the component that controls our template like that, and where we can write our logic, our JavaScript logic, and all of that, and register our input. So that's basically how it works. Now, if I want also to have my footer, I'm just also going to come right here and use the same command, ng, let me clear this up, ng gc footer, enter, and that's also going to create a folder for me with all the files I need for writing the footer. And before I head on to have my navbar, I want us to declare our variable and have our global styling in the style.css. So I don't really want this to be a CSS course, because right these days you can easily generate styling code by going to an AI and just, say help with a navbar styling or something like that, and it's going to generate your CSS code for you. So because of that, I'm just going to pre-write the code. I'm just going to have it up right here so we can be a little bit faster. So these are my generic styling I came up with for my entire application. Remember, as we rightly said, your global style should be in your style.css. So right here, I have some variable defined, which is going to be my primary color. These are my colors. Then these are some other colors right there, and some other, spacing like pixels, stuff like that, that would be used, and etc. So that's going to be that. And I'm going to head on to my navbar right here, and let's start with our navbar.ts implementation. And before we do that, let's get to see the older project and what we expect. So this is the older project, and this is what our navbar is going to look like. And we want something like this. And also, if we are on a mobile device, like something like this, we want this a little bit of menu item. So when you click on that, you can open, it's going to have a drop down, a vertical drop down, where you can, select like that. You can toggle menu open and close. So this also will be implemented as well. Now for us to do that, I'm going to first of all come within my navbar right here and have my variable to say is menu open. This is going to help us to check if the menu is open. I'm going to wrap the variable within my signal like that, and by default that's going to be a false. Okay. Now the signal is imported from your Angular core. So for those who are not very familiar with Angular, you might be surprised. What does signal do? So signal is a wrapper that helps to wrap our variable, which helps to manage state. So remember, a component have different states. A component can be in an initialized state, it can be in the changing state, it can be in a destroyed state, and all of that. And when you create a variable like that and you are not wrapping it within a signal, let's say I have my variable right here. I'm just going to say, let's say, full, and then probably I'm just going to say false, like that. Yeah, I can actually do this and it's going to work. Now, the problem with this is that this is going to lead to a memory leakage. In a situation whereby my component is destroyed, these value right here, this variable will still be flying around. The value of this is going to be flying around, and which can lead to memory leakage when we start building very complex applications. So we don't really want that. So a better way for us to define our variables or to wrap our variables is by using signal. So this is going to make sure that your variable is managed properly within your life cycle of your component, so that when your component is destroyed or when the state is changed, the variable can easily be managed to avoid memory leakage. So you're going to be seeing signal often, and it's basically a wrapper for our variable. You can use it to wrap your variable of any data type. It can be an array, it can be an object, it can be a string, a boolean, yeah, just a wrapper for our variable. Okay, so now that's all. That's that. I'm also going to have a method to help me to toggle a menu, and then to also, you know, when I click something like this, when I click on this menu right here, I want to toggle the menu to bring this up. And when I click on it again, I want to also, toggle it off, something like that. So that's going to be done by coming right here. Let me have those methods down and say toggle menu. Let me just do it very fast so we can probably be on the right side. So that's going to be toggle menu, and whenever a user clicks on that hammer, I'm just going to change the value of this is menu open to say this dot is menu open dot update, and I'm going to say the value, which is the existing value right there, which is this one right here. You can say value, or you can say v is then going to be, I'm going to update it to say not the value, like that, something like not one. That should be one arrow like that, something like not value. Then also, that basically what I'm doing is that if I click on this, it's going to change the value, and then click on that again, it's going to just toggle the value on or up. And based on the value in our template, we can then decide to display the menu in a vertical format based on the if the menu is in a true or false situation. So that's what these are doing. When you click on that, it's going to change the value of this from false to true. If you click in again, it's going to change from true to false. That's what this method is doing. And let's also have to close the menu. Also, this is going to always set the value to be false by saying this dot is menu opened dot set, and that's going to be false. So when I click close menu, it's always going to set it to be false, like that. So that is it. And also, one last thing before we move to the template, in the imports right here, we can see Angular. The modern Angular is basically a standalone application whereby each component is a standalone. It can have its own imports and have other things. Now, in our template, we are going to be using a router link to navigate. There are two different ways to navigate. You can navigate in your template, and you can navigate in your using your TypeScript code. So if you want to navigate in your template, have navigation in your template where you can move from one page to another. In the import right here, within the component, you have to register that by importing the router or called router link, like that, and that is coming from the Angular router. So by having this router link, you can then in your template then perform import by using the router link tag. So we're going to see that. So let's do that quickly. In my Navbar HTML right here, I'm going to first of all remove this and basically have my header right there, and have my header, and then within the header I'm going to have my div like so. And then within that right there, I'm going to have my little implementation. First of all, let me have my link that will basically, something like this. Let's have something, let me take this back. Let's have something like this that says tax flow. And when you click on it, it's going to probably just, keep you right there in the home on like that. So that's going to be like that. And let me move this a little bit backward. And right here, you can see we're using the router link. This is basically saying that, move to the home page, router link slash. Now, if you don't register this router link as an import, you will not be able to use this router link right here within your A tag. Okay. So now let's head on to have our list item displayed. That's going to be our menu items, which is going to be the home, to do, and then add to do stuff. That's going to be like this. And then I'm having my own style already, which has been pre-written as my class. And you can see right here again, I'm using the router link. Very important. That's going to help us to move to this respective page. Having done that, I'm going to have just going to have the menu items. If we are on a mobile device, this is going to be triggered as we rightly saw. And then I'm just going to have a conditional statement to say if the menu is open, then do some stuff. That's going to be done right here. If the menu is opened, then display something that you can trigger to close the menu. So if the menu is opened, then display that stuff, that like X, that can be used to close the menu. So that's what that is. Now for those who might not know what this at if mean, at if is a conditional statement in Angular. This is how you can write your stuff. You can do that and say at if, and then write your statement right there. And then within this code block, you can have your template like that and do your template. So if this condition is true, whatever template you have right here would be rendered. So that's what we are doing right here. So if the menu is opened, if this is true, is menu opened function is true, this is going to be rendered like that. So that is it for our navbar. Now for us to display this, if I come right here, and this is our project right here. No, not is this one? No, I think yeah, this is our project right here. So right now the number is not showing because we're not displaying that. So for us to show that, I'm going to come to my app.ts right here. That is going to be rendered in the app.html. You remember, this our app.html in the root of our app folder. It's where our hello world is coming from. So for us to display our navbar, it should be in that same place. So I'm going to come right here and then find a way to have reference to the navbar and display it. Now, before I do that, remember the app.ts is the file that controls the app.html. So as we rightly saw, now for me to bring any component down to render that right here, I need to come to the app.ts and register the component right there. So I'm going to come right here to the app.ts and I'm going to register the component called navbar. I want to import the component in this app, and also we also want to import the footer too. Also, you're just going to say footer like that, and yep. Okay, so that's it. Also, you can decide to modify your title. For now, our title says Angular front end. You can decide to modify it and say to do app or to do Angular or anything you want it to be. Okay, now we've registered our navbar and footer, or we've imported them in the app component controller right here. I'm going to come to my app.html right here and then bring those components down. Now for us to do that, it's very simple. I can get rid of this, and I want my navbar to be at the top. Now if you go back to your navbar, you go to the navbar.ts, you can see this selector is the identifier for the navbar. So anytime you want to display this navbar template, which is this template, you must use this selector right here, which is the identifier. So copy the selector name, come to the app.html, and then just have it up right there as a component or as a tag, and that's going to display your navbar. Now, if I moved up now right here, you can see this my navbar is being displayed, right? Task flow, add and update to do. Now, it's not really beautiful because the styling is not there. So for us to have the styling up, I'm just going to come to my nav.css and then paste my style right there. And here you can see this is a navbar, right? It's very beautiful. Similar way, if you want to display the footer, you again come to the app.html right here, and below the router link, you're going to have your footer, which is likely going to be app footer. If I'm not sure, I can come to the footer component right here and click on the footer right here, .ts, and you can see this is the selector for the footer. Just copy the selector like that, and then come to the app.html, and then this is going to be the footer. Now, if you see right here, we have the router outlet right here. So what this means is that this is going to be the page. All your pages will sit right here. The navbar is going to be displayed above, as we rightly saw. Footer right here is going to display below, as we rightly see it right here. Though not yet working correctly. And then this one, the router outlet, is going to be our page, sort of like our home page, our to-dos page, our add to-dos page, edit to-dos page is going to be seated right here. Now, how will Angular know what to sit right here? In your application, inside your app, you have what we call the app.routes.ts. Now, when you click on this is where we register our route. And whatever route is registered right here is going to sit on this router outlet. So that's how it works. And we're just going to head on quickly to have our footer implementation right here. For our footer, I'm going to come to the footer.ts and want to display the current year right here. So I'm going to come right here and say current year. That's going to be a new date like that. And then I'm just going to say dot get full year. I'll then invoke it. So that's going to be, this is going to help us to get the current year, and then we are going to get hold of the value in our template. Also, in our footer, let me go to the older project. This is the footer. We want to also be able to have some navigation so that when you click on that, it's going to take you to the respective page. Now, for us to do that, remember, if we want to have navigation on our template, we must come to the import and register the router link right there. And that has been imported right here for. So that's it. And I'm going to come to the footer right here and have my template up. First of all, I'm just going to have my footer div right here. And then within this div, I'm going to have my footer implementation, which is going to be like that. And again, these are basically dummy data that I pre-wrote, so it's not really something we have to worry about. It's basically just a div and a div, and right here I'm having my router link right here to move to this respective page right here. Okay, so that is it. Now if I come back, let me pull up my terminal just to be sure it's running properly. If I come back right here, you can see, okay, the footer is displayed, but the styling is not there. So let's have the styling up right here and then check it out. So in my footer.css right here, I'm going to have it up right there, and now you can see the styling has been affected, which is beautiful. Again, make sure in your app.ts you register the footer component in the imports, and in the app.html, make sure the footer is below the router outlet so it can appear below every page right here. The navbar is always going to be at the top of every page. This is where the page sits on, and the app footer will always be at the bottom of every page. So make sure that's how yours is structured. Okay, so that's it. And also, before we go on, for those who are new to Angular and who might not really understand what these are doing right here, all of these, let me just go over this again. Now, for every component you create, you're going to have a selector. A component, as you rightly saw, when you create a component, you're going to have a folder, and it's going to have the styling file, the HTML file, which is the template file, the testing file, which is the spec file, and then your TypeScript file, which is going to be where you have your JavaScript logic. Now, this is the component right here, which is where you have your logic. It's what control your entire component. So right here, we have the selector, which is basically going to determine how you can reference this component right there. If you want to reuse this component anywhere, that will be done by using the selector right here. Now, you have the import also. If you want to make use of other stuff, like some things that by default are not there, like you want to navigate, you want to bring other components and use their properties, those should be registered in the import right here, or they should be registered here, so Angular can get to use those components or those implementation. Now right here you have our template URL. This points to where the template of this component lies. So this component is actually controlling something. So what is it controlling? This is the template. This is the location of the template that this component is controlling, so that whatever implementation you have right here can be used within that template. So that's going to be the link to the template. and the style URL is going to be the link to the style that will be infected on the template. So that's basically the structure and what these are all about, and that's it. Okay, so that's it. We're kind of a little bit on the same page, and we head on to have our home page. For our home page, we're going to create a component. I'm going to close all of this up right here, and then I'm going to pull up my terminal again, and then let me clear this. I'm going to use the command ng gc and call that home. It's going to create my home component with all the necessary file and folder. Now that has been done in the app right here. We can see the home is there, and this is going to be one of the simplest components we are going to write. So it's very simple. If I go to the other project, this is basically how a home component should be. These are just dummy data where you can click on task to go to the task. You can click on add task to go to the add to do page, and then some dummy, everything is going to be dummy data. Now I'm going to head on to the home.ts, and because we are going to be able to move to other pages, I'm going to be using the router link in my template, so I have to register it right here in the import. Now within your home, I'm going to come right here and say router link, and that's been brought in as imported. And then I'm going to quickly have my styling up right here, and this styling is only going to affect my template. As we rightly saw right here, we said the link to the style that will affect your template should be here, which is going to be this one. So this style right here is only going to affect this template. Now in the template, let's quickly come up with something, and I'm going to have my div as usual and have a styling called home. And then I'm going to have my first section, which is just going to be the hero part. That's going to be this hero, and that's going to be this big stuff right here. And then let's have the second section, which is going to be these other ones right here. And that's going to be this section here. Let me give some space. So this is going to be the hero section, and this is going to be the feature section. So that's it. And right here, if you click on the add to do, it's going to go to the add page, which for now does not exist. And when you click on the view my task, it's going to go to the to-dos page. So that's going to be it. And if I come right here to my application, remember, it's not going to be displayed. It's not going to be displayed because we've not registered this route. Okay. Now for us to register this route, I'm going to come right here within my app folder. You are going to see the app.route.ts. So click on that, and here is where we register all our routes. Okay, so right here, I'm just going to open this array right here and say create an object of all our routes and say path. And then the path is going to be, if it's empty like that, then comma, I'm going to say the component that should be rendered when you are in an empty path or when you're in the home path should be your home component, which has been imported from our home right here. So that's how it's done. You can put a comma so you can have every other part. Okay, so if I, again, just make sure you pull your terminal to be sure it's running properly. If there's any error, it's going to be thrown and like that. So again, if I come right here and you can see this is our app, this is now our home page. If I go to, let's say, slash any other page, you can see it's not there. If I go to slash home, you can see it's not there. Now, for us to be able to also display this home page, when your URL is slash home, we need to do that also by coming right here and say if the path, right, is home, that means if it's a slash home, then the component to be rendered should also be home like that. So now if I come right here and I go to slash home, you can see where the component, home component is now being rendered. So that is how things are done. But one problem, if I click on rubbish, anything that does not exist, you can see it's still kind of, nothing is going on. So I want us to redirect back to the home page if you are on any route that is not registered. So for us to do that, I'm going to put a comma right here and again say the path. That's going to be If the path is a wildcard, that's done by using star star. Then I'm going to say redirect to. Then it's going to redirect you to the home page, which is empty, this one, or you can say to home like that. Anyone is fine. Okay. Now that's it. Now, if I come back right here and say slash some kind of crazy stuff, you can do it redirected me back to my home page, which means that we're not seeing those, stuff again. So that's how wildcard works. Let me try one star again. Let me see. Before it used to be one star. Let me check if that's going to work. Star, it did not work. So it has not been two star like that. Okay. So that's just it. And we're going to head on to have our to-dos page. But before we do that, we need to have our API service, because in the to-dos page, we are going to be connected to our backend and making API call to get our to-dos. So before we have our to-dos page, we need to have our API service that will contain methods that will help us to get data and save data in our backend. So let's have that service file or service class. I'm going to close all of this right here and again pull in my terminal and then come right here. And for you to, let me clear this up. For you to generate that service, you're going to use the command ng again, ng generate. This time around, it's no longer going to be a C component. It's going to be an S, which means service. And I want that to be in a folder called service, and then slash, the name is going to be, should be called to do dash service like that. So this is going to generate a service for us. ng means Angular, G generate, S means service, and the name of the service should be called to do service, and it should be within a folder called service. So if this service folder does not exist, it should create this folder for us. So click on enter, and you can see it has been created for us, both the service and then the file. And if I come to my app right here, if I come to open my app right here, you can see a service folder was created, and within the service folder, I have my to-do service.ts. Let me pull this down. And I have my to-do service.spec, which is the test, where I can have my test to test whatever method I'm having right here. So let me just take this down and we'll proceed to have our services right here, methods that can make API call. And the first thing I have to do is to bring in my backend URL. Or before I do that, let me first of all inject my HTTP client. Remember, the HTTP client is what we'll be using to make API call. And as I rightly said in the beginning of the lecture, if you are going to make an API call on your Angular application, make sure you register that. So for you to do that, go to the app.config and have your provide HTTP client. So you have to register this and import that from this right here. Now you've registered this, you need to inject it into your service so we can make use of this to make API call. Now come to your service, except you are using a different package for making API call. But if you're going to be using your HTTP client, you must register this. It has already been provided by Angular, which is part of the Angular common module. Now you've registered this in your app.config.ts. Come to your file right here, which is your to-do service, and let's inject that, or let's auto-wire that. So that's going to be a private, let's call it HTTP. I'm just going to say inject. Very easy. Inject is coming from the Angular core, which has been imported from. I'm going to say inject. What do I want to inject? I want to inject the HTTP client like that, which is again coming from the HTTP common, which we can see right here, HTTP common like that. Okay. So this is going to help us to bring down the HTTP client, which we'll be using to make API calls. And before we proceed, I want to also save my API URL. That's the URL to my backend. And as you rightly saw, that was HTTP localhost, and the port was 8085. That was our backend port. You can confirm by coming to our backend, and we can see the port is 8085 like that. Okay. So that's it. And then I'm just going to head on to have my methods to get all to-dos, to get a to-do by ID, to create a to-do, to update, and then to delete a to-do. Let's first of all have to get all to-dos, and that's going to return an observable of data type any. You can also decide to have your to-do, object interface or stuff, but let's just make it simple by having a data type any. So now right here, I'm going to return on the go, return, I'm going to say this dot HTTP. I'm having access to this HTTP right now. This means that this object access your feed, your property, which is the HTTP property. I'm going to say dot is a get request, and then I'm going to say where do you want to get, what API should we call, and that's going to be let me say variable. That's going to be this dot your API URL, which is our API URL right here. And then the path is going to be a slash, no, that should be here, is going to be slash to do's. And then that's going to be it. And then I'm going to say dot pipe. Pipe basically means that once you've gotten your data, we want you to filter. And how do you want to filter? We want to say map. And then map should be from your arrow SGX like that. We're going to say map the data, and what do you want to do? Collect the response. The result should be called response. And what do you want to do with the results? Just extract the data by saying response.data. That's going to be it. And again, let me see. By making a get request to this. Okay, the get request should contain the type of what we want to do. Let me call this any. So this means we are making a get request, and the response is going to be of data type any. That's what this means. And then we're making an API call to this, and we're accessing this path slash to do's, and we're going to pass the value through a filter. We're going to map over it, get the response, and extract the data from the response. So that's going to be to get a to do. We also have to get a to do by ID. I'm just going to be very fast right here. So this is going to be to get to do by ID. The same thing. I'm basically passing the ID, and it's going to access these paths again, collect the response. Let's have to create a to do. That's going to be a post request. I'm saying http.post, and then do my necessary stuff, bundle the title and the description down, pass it as a body, and then filter the data out. I also get to update a to do. This will help me to update my to-do. Again, it's a put request, bundle my data, pass it down, filter, and get my response. Finally, let's also have to delete a to-do. So that's going to be to delete a to-do, and this is the path again, passing the ID, and it's going to delete our to-do. So this is it. This is the method we'll be using to access and get and save data to our backend. We're going to also quickly head on to have the to-dos component, which is going to display all the to-dos for us. So for the to-dos component, I'm going to create that by saying ng generate C component. I'm just going to call that to-dos like that, and that's going to create a component for me called to-dos. Now I'm going to close this up right here, and in my to-dos right there, I'm going to open the to-dos.ts, and I'm going to head on to have my implementation. So first of all, I'm going to be having the router link register right here. Remember, we want to be able to like come right here when you are displaying your to-dos. Want to be able to have a button that you can click, and it will navigate you to the add to-dos page. Okay, so let's get that up. And before I move on, I'm going to first of all bring in my API service by saying private to-do service, and that's going to be inject. Inject is how we use to inject something in, or you can say auto wire. Again, that should be coming from the Angular core. Yes, don't forget, and that's going to be their to-do service, and that's been imported. This is going to help to inject the to-do service down, and we can use this to have access to the methods. Now I'm going to have my to-do, which is going to contain all my to-do data. That's going to be a signal, as rightly said. variable should be wrapped within a signal. And again, that's going to be a signal of data type any, and it's going to be an data type any, and then that's going to be an empty array like that. So by default, let's make it an empty array. Also, I'm also going to have some other variables just to check if there's error, and then is modal open, and then to delete. So what this does is that in the same page right here, let me go to the other project. In the same to-dos page, if I click on delete, I want a modal to be open. So we need to keep track of if the modal is open or not. And when I click delete or cancel, I want to also keep the modal closed. So if the modal is open, this is going to be true. And if I'm done, click on the cancel, or if I click on delete and it's deleted, it's going to set the modal to be false like that. Okay. Now when I click on the delete, it's going to call the to delete and pass the ID down to it. Okay. Now let's fetch our to-dos. Let's have a method to fetch the to-dos, and that's going to be called fetch to-dos. This is going to fetch our to-dos from our back end, and that's going to be, first of all, let's clear the error by saying this the error to be set to be null. And after that, I'm just going to say to do service dot get all, and that's going to be, let me call this to do's because it's going to be plural right here. Let me call this to do. So this is going to be to do service dot get all, and I'm basically subscribing. You remember the get all method is going to return an observable. An observable, it's a reactive. So this is more like this reactive programming. So it's a way for us to, get data and display as to subscribe to the for us to make an API call and subscribe to the result. So when we make a subscription and we're going to be waiting for the result to come in, and the subscription will always be there, which means that if we can subscribe to, like, let's say, a million, we can be expecting a million data, and we can decide to get data one after the other, let's say, to get them in batch, like 10, 10, 10, or 100, 100, like that. So it's a very robust way to build large applications which is data intensive. So by subscribing, you are very well assured that you are going to be getting the value gradually, or you are getting your data gradually. So yes, it's a reactive programming, and when you subscribe to it, you can wait for the result. So what I'm doing right here is basically saying, because the auto do return an observable, I have the privilege to subscribe to that. And when I subscribe, the next basically means that if it's successful, and then get hold of the data and set the data to this variable right here. Error if means that during the subscription, if there's error while trying to get the data from my backend, set the error to the error right here, or if you cannot access the message, say fail to load. Let me say fail to load to do data or something like that. Okay, now that's my fetch to do. Now for this to work, I'm just going to say ng on init. This is special method on init, and I'm just going to fetch to do, say this dot fetch to do's. Now the ng on init is a lifecycle method in Angular. So this method is called whenever the component is mounted, or whenever, that basically means that whenever the component is initialized, which means that whenever a user goes to that page for the first time. So this is my home page right now. If I click on this is my home page right now, and when I'm on the home page, my to-dos page is inactive, like it's not mounted, it's not initialized. So when I click on view my task, immediately I land on this to-dos page. This ng on init is initialized, is called, which means that my to-do component is called, is initialized, or it's mounted. So that means that this method is going to be triggered. And when this method is triggered, what does it do? It's going to call this method right here, which is this one right here, to fetch our to do from our back end and save it in these to do's right here. Now in my template, I can then have the liberty to have access to this data which has been called and saved, and then loop over it and then display it to the user to see. So that's the power of ng on init. Is a lifecycle method that is triggered when the component is initialized, which means when the user just got to that page for the first time. We also have other lifecycle methods like on change detected, on destroy, on deactivate, and whole lot of other. But let's focus on this for now. Okay. Also, I want to also have to open the modal. Let's also have that method so that when you click on delete right here, it's going to open the modal up. Let's have the method to trigger that, and that's going to be called open modal. Let me just have that right down. And when that is called, it's going to pull your modal up and it's going to set the modal open to be true, which is this one. And let's also have a method to confirm a delete, right? When you click on yes, I want to delete, this is going to delete the to do from our back end. And then it's going to trigger the close modal, which is going to be close modal like that, something like that. Okay, that's going to be help us to close our modal. Okay, which is this one right here. Let me push this down so we can have a better glimpse of, let me, yeah, just have a better glimpse of it. So let me move this like this and move this like this and move this like this to have a better view of what, yep. So this is looking good. And these are the methods and functionality we have in our component. And let's head on to have our templates. And before we do that, I want to quickly have my styling set up. I'm going to come to the todo.css and have my styling set up right there. Very simple styling. Now in my template, I'm going to come right here and again have my to-dos page, which is going to be a wrapper for everything. Get rid of this. Have my to-dos page, and within that page, I'm going to have my implementation like that. Have everything up like that. Yeah, very easy peasy. And here I'm basically, let me explain what I'm doing. I'm basically saying that having stuff, I'm basically having this stuff right here, my to do, and then the button to add a to do, which is right here, a to do and a button to add a to do. Now at if right now is a conditional statement that say if error is there, if we have error when trying to make API call, display the error right here. Else if error is not there, if the to-dos.length it's 0, which means that okay, you do not have any to do currently. Let's just say no task yet, then create your first task to get started. Else, if the length of the to do from our backend is greater than 0, which means that if there's at least one or more to do item, I'm going to use a for loop to say at for means that at for loop basically means that loop over your to-dos which you've gotten from your DB, get each individual data as to do, and then with that we can have access to the title, the description, and all of that. Okay, and then at the right, which is something like this, we have to button to edit and to delete a to do, and we're basically saying that when you click on the edit, it's going to navigate to the edit to do's page, and it's going to pass in the ID down. When you click on delete, it's going to trigger the open modal and pass the to do ID, and then you can then delete the to do. So that's it for our template. And before I test this out, I need to register this as rightly so. You must register your route or your page before it can be recognized as a page. So I'm going to come to my app.routes.ts right here within my app folder, and I'm going to register that route. So I'm going to copy this one right here, and then that's going to be called to-dos, and then the component should be called to-dos like that, and that's been imported from our to-dos component. So again, pull up your terminal or command to be sure that you are not having a major code error. You can Ctrl C to stop, and then ng serve to run again, or npm run start. So that's going to rebuild, and it has been running. It is running. So to say, I'm going to come back to this is the actual project, and when I click on to-dos, you can see these are my to-dos that has been gotten. If I click on delete, okay, that's not working because I have not actually I've not actually wrote the modal that will be displayed. So for us to do that, I'm going to come back right here, come to my todo.html. I'm going to, have my modal displayed up right there. So that's going to be something like this. I'm going to do that right down at the bottom to say at, where is it? There's at right here on my laptop. Okay, at if, right? If then is modal open. If the modal is open, which means that if the modal is true, if this condition is true, then I'm going to do something. Then I'm going to have my template here that will be displayed, right? So if the modal is open, then display this template up right here, which will help us to delete our task. So again, let's go back again, click on delete. You can see modal is open, our template has been displayed. If I click on yes, delete, it's going to trigger the delete like that. Okay, this other one again, if I click on delete, yes, delete, that has been deleted, like, and it's been removed. And when it's been deleted, it's going to take us back to the to-dos page, as we can see right here. It's going to just, close that modal, and that's going to be it. So that's it, and we're going to head on to have the add implementation. Right now, when I click on add to do, nothing's going to happen because that add page do not exist. So let's have that page where we can add a to-do. To add a to-do, I'm going to click up, close all of these, and we need to have that component down. So I'm going to open my terminal again, come right here and clear this up and generate that component by using the command nggc. Let's just call it add dash to do. It's going to create that component for me, and you can see those folders have been created. And if I click on that, I can see my add to do stuff right here. I'm going to click on the template component shortly. Then I'm going to have our implementation. Now, the first thing we have to do, we want to make use of what we call a forms module. So if a forms module, it's a co-implementation of Angular that can help us to, have a form, have access to Angular form features that can help us to bundle this form, perform validations, and other cool stuff. So I'll be using the form module. And remember, as I rightly said, if you want to use anything, you have to have the import it up right here. So I'm going to come right here to the import and say forms module, and that has been imported from the Angular forms. So when you want to use any custom stuff or anything, either a module or a component, you have to import it up right here like so. Okay, so that's it. So I need to bring in I need to inject my to-do service. That's going to be inject. Then that's going to be our to-do service. And also, I want to also make use of routing in my TypeScript code. Remember, as I rightly said, if you want to route in your template, you need to come to the import right here and say router link and import it right here. This is going to help you to use the router link to route or to navigate to different page within your template. But if you want to route in your code, let's say you want to perform a routing right here. Let's say we want to add a to-do to our existing to-do, and when the action is complete, we want to navigate to another page right here within our TypeScript or our JavaScript code, then you have to use what we call the router. Again, I'm going to bring that in by saying private router, and that's going to be inject. Inject helps us to bring something down. That's going to be router. And again, the router should be coming from the Angular router like that. Okay. So this router will help us to route within our TypeScript code or our JavaScript code, while the router link will help us to route in our template, in our HTML template. Okay. So now having done that, I'm going to bring some of my variables right down so we can be a little bit faster. And that's going to be the title. Let me import my signal right there from Angular core. That's going to be the title. Want something like this. Let me come right here. Okay, let me go to the older project. Want something like this whereby we can keep hold of the title and the description, and then that's going to be the value will be held right here. If there's error, we hold the error. Then we're going to keep track of if we are submitting the data to prevent double submit. Just want to keep track of those things. Then let me also have the submit method. When you click on submit or add, let's trigger this method. It's basically going to check if we have our title. If our title is there, it's going to continue. If it's not there, won't be able to submit. Now, if submit is going to be true, so we can render something to say submitting, something like that. And the most important thing is this one right here, where we are bundling our title and description, and then we are making a call to the create to do method to create a to do. We are subscribing to the observable. Now the next means that if it's a successful response, we are going to navigate. This is how to navigate by saying the router object which we've created dot navigate is going to navigate to the to do's page if the response is successful. If there's any error, we're not going to navigate anywhere. We want to display the error and then probably have the opportunity to recreate or fill the form again. So that's it. Also, we can also cancel a to do if you don't want to edit again. Let's just click on cancel, and when you click on cancel, it's going to navigate you to the to do's page. So this is our implementation, and let me quickly head on to have the styling before we have our template. The styling up right here, and for our template, it's going to be pretty easy. It's just a form. So let me first of all create a div for the form, get rid of that, and right here I'm going to create another div for just another wrapper, and then after that I'm going to have my h1 and p, just say add new to do, fill in the details, and then I'm going to say at if, right, if we have our error. When you're having your error right here, it's a signal. Make sure you invoke it by using this method. When you invoke it, you have access to the value of the error. So don't make the mistake of just saying at error. If you're using a signal without invoking, this is not going to work. So because we are using a signal to hold the error data, you must invoke the signal to get the value. So say if error, invoke it, very important. And then I'm going to say if error exists, then div, I'm just going to display the error right here by just saying div. I can pass a class name, and then I'm just going to say, let me pass a class name like here. That's going to be form. I already have a styling called form page underscore error. And then to access the value of the error, right, is going to be, template, and just say error, and then invoke it again to access the value. Very important. Okay, so that's it. And after that, I'm going to then have my little bit of form right down, and I'm just quickly do that and then explain what I'm doing. So I'm going to move down to have my little bit of form, which is this form right here. And again, this is the styling again, and on ng submit means that if we are submitting the form, if you user click on the submit button, trigger the on submit method we've already written. And this is the form. We have our input. Let me move this a little bit. So we have our input where you can pass in your data, and I want also to explain this thing. There's what's called the ng model. So this is how we do a two-way data binding. So there's what we call a two-way data binding. So two-way data binding is a situation whereby as I am typing a value right here, it is being saved in my signal variable, and at the same time the value is being displayed to me. So this is a two-way data binding. And for us to do that, we use in Angular, we use what we call the ng model. You can see it say ng model, if just do something rapid within a function and passing your bracket around it equal to title. So what this means is that as the user is typing the title, the value is being saved right here in the title, and whatever value you have right here, whether an existing value or a new value, is going to be also displayed in the input for you to see the value. So that's the way data binding, and that can be done using the ng model. Okay, and the ng model is coming from the forms module. That was what I rightly said. Make sure you have your forms module. That's where the ng model is coming from. If you don't have this, register the import. You will not be able to use this ng model for two-way data binding. Okay, same thing with the description. We are saving the value and collecting it. When you click on submit, it's going to trigger the submit button, and it's going to, you know, it's going to trigger the on submit. If you click on cancel, it's going to call the cancel and then take you back to your to-dos page. Now, this is the little trick I was doing with the submitting. If the submitting is true, I'm basically going to disable the button. I'm just going to say creating. Then when it is done, I'm going to free the button again to just show create to do. So this was the essence of me having this is submitted variable. It's just more like a user experience kind of stuff, not really important. Okay, so that's it. So right now I need to, for me to display this page, I need to come to my routes and then register it. So within your app right here, go to the app.routes.ts and then I'm going to register the add to do's right here by saying the route should be an add, and this is going to be called add to do, and make sure this is being imported at the top right here. So again, before you test, check to make sure that your app is running correctly. And I'm going to come right here. This is our project. If I click on view your task, if I click on add new, you can see it's gone to the add route, and this is the form right here. So I can add a new one to say new to do added, and description can probably just leave it blank. Create and need to do added. Let me add another one, say added. Okay, you know what? Let me just click on create without adding. You can see it's not going to work because it's going to return back. So let's just say added again, and then just do some crazy. Let me just, I don't know, do some stuff like this. Let me just say yeah. So this is it. I can click on delete, it's begun. I can click on delete, it's begun. Right? So what we're going to do next is to edit this to do. If I click on edit right now, you can see the edit page is not there. So we have to kick that up. So one little observation at the top right here, I can see my Angular front end is too jammed together. Let me just quickly modify that. I'm going to come to my app.ts and where is it? And my app.html right here, and this is the title Angular front end. I'm just going to give it a space, app.html, and then Angular front end is now kind of there like that. So that's it, and we're going to head on to have the edit to do's page. Now for the edit to do, I'm going to close this all up like so and come to my terminal and use the command again, nggc, call it edit to do. Enter, and that's going to create this component for me. So what I want to do next is to first of all register this route so we can get to see how our patch will look like. So I'm going to come to the app.routes.ts. I'm going to copy this and call it edit. That's going to be, let's just call it to do, then slash, then this is going to be the ID, then slash edit. So what this means is that when you click on, sorry, this should be edit to do, not add to do, edit to do's page. Okay, this one right here. So when you click on edit to do, let's just quickly do that, which is this one. When you click on edit to do, you can see it goes to this slash to do slash your ID slash edit. So now for us to do this, you can say edit to do works right in that page. So we want to be able to extract this ID value from the parameter, right? Which is this ID right here to the parameter. That's what I want to do. I want to be able to extract that and then get a to do by ID, display the data, allow the user to make modification and then receive those data. Now, again, this ID right here is, that's how to do an ID, put it in double column and then passing the value right here. So follow this format for that. If you do not put this double column, if you do something like this, it's not going to be an ID anymore. It's going to be a path. So if you want this to be an ID, that's how it's done. Now let's go to the edit to do and then have our implementation right up. So the first thing again, remember the edit to do, let me come right here. The edit to do is basically going to be, to add it to this, basically a form data where you can pass your title, description, you can mark this completed, and then you can do your stuff. So that means I'm going to bring in my form data so I can make use of the two-way data binding and the Angular form module, not form data, and the Angular form, beautiful stuff. Okay. So having done that, I need to bring in my route so that I can navigate when I'm done. So that's going to be private router, and that's going to be, I'm injecting inject. That's going to be the router, as you rightly saw. Router, that's going to help me to navigate when I'm done with adding. I can move to another page. Now I'm also going to bring in my to-do service, which is going to be to-do service, and that's going to inject our to-do service like that. And then I can have access to my to-do methods to update a to-do. Now also I need to bring in what we call activated routes, right? And I'm going to just call that activated route, or you can just call it route. Let's call it route to be a little bit, easier. I'm going to inject it right there by saying activated route. Now the difference between this router, as we can see, and the activated route, as you can see, are basically different. So the router, which we've used previously, helps us to navigate or move from one page to another from your JavaScript code. While the activated route, his job is to help us to scan our routes. So for the edit page, this is going to be our route. So the activated route will help us to scan our route and get hold of an ID or a variable that is being passed into our route. Remember, in the edit page, as you rightly saw, we are going to be having this route right here, and we are going to be having the ID value passed into it, which is going to be saved as ID in the variable in the route. Now, for us to extract the value of this ID, we need to use what we call the activated route, which will help us scan our URL, all our routes, and then get hold of the ID value. Okay, so that's it. So first of all, let me just say ID. Let's by default give it to be 0, and then I'm going to then use the activated route to then get hold of the ID value. And before I do that, let me, just display my, stuff like that. Variables, which is going to be the title. The title description is completed. If there's error, we're going to save that. And if we are submitting, we're also going to save that also. Okay, now let's have on to have our engine on init. So engine on init, and let me 1 second. Let me quickly see what I have here. Let me see. I just want us to, okay, yeah, engine on it. I wanted to check if I use engine mounted. So it's engine on init, okay? So engine on init right there. So we already know what this does. Whenever your component is initialized, this method will be called, and whatever we have right here is going to be triggered. So what do I want to do? I want to, first of all, set the value of the ID right here to be wrap it within a number, and I'm just going to say this dot the route, which is going to be the route. This is the activated route right here to scan our route right there, not to navigate. Then I'm going to say dot, take a snapshot of it. Snapshot means that we are scanning over it, scan over your route, and say parameter dot get, go over the parameter and get the value of the ID which is there, and save it as the value of the ID right here. So let me add a comment and say this will scan our URL to get hold of the ID value, something like that. Okay, something like that. I can probably just place it above here so we can see that as I code along. So that's the first thing we have to do. Then the next thing we have to do is to, just get hold of the next things for me to call my API service to, you know, to get those data by ID. So that's going to be to do service.get to do by ID. I'm going to pass the ID we've gotten from our params, and then I'm going to then set the title, the description, and then the is completed like that, which is going to be title description is completed, and that's going to be the data like that. Okay, so that's it. And I can also say, okay, no, I'm say this dot title dot, let me see, update, and let's just leave that right like that. Okay, so that's going to set the value right there. And then I'm going to move down to have my onSubmit method. Whenever I submit the data, whenever I click on the submit to re-update, what should happen? And then that's going to be this one right here. And then it's going to be this method right here to handle the submit. And let also have to cancel. If I decide to cancel, I'm basically just going to navigate away from the edit page. Okay, so when I'm submitting, I'm basically bundling the data and passing it down. When I'm canceling, I'm basically navigating. So let me quickly check something in the add to those page. Let me check something right here. Okay, that's fine. All right, so that's it for to edit a to-do. So let me quickly have the styling, and then we'll have the template. So for the styling, it's going to have it up right there. And then for our template, let me just going to be very fast, and I'm just going to have everything down. It's a simple form, and we don't really want us to waste time. So that's going to be to edit. Again, it's a form. We already understand how this works. We already saw how to add a to-do, and it's basically the same form. We saw the ng model for two-way data binding. We saw if conditional statement, if error exists, display it. We saw, just what we did when we were adding a to-do, but this time around, this is to update or to edit. So I'm going to pull just to be sure my app is running correctly. We're going to test this out. Again, this is the project where we are in. And when I click on view my task, everything is there. Let's add a new one to say, so visit Paris for a holiday, something like that. Create a to-do that has been created. Edit a to-do, we can say to visit Paris in summer. And then that's been edited. I can also mark as complete, though I have not really completed this task, but that has been marked as complete. So let me unmark that. And let me say to study for a pilot program, this has been completed, mark as completed. So that's it for that. You can view your to-dos, you can add a to-do, you can go to your home, and you can click on this stuff right down. It's working correctly, and so that's it for the course. And again, the code is going to be available. You can have access to the code, look at the methods right there, and compare. If there are any part that is not clear or that's confusing, you can just copy them, paste it on an AI platform, then they can give you more explanation on what the code is doing, and also do way to use AI to also learn and also to code along, or to to give you better flow of your project. So that is it, and I'm going to see you in subsequent courses.